Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure Podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and I also know there's a lot out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention and distract you. But it just means so much to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is a show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. As will be stories from myself, as well as from the amazing guests that I welcome on this podcast. But in this episode, you have me today. This is a solo cast. Don't really have a fancy name for these solo casts. I used to in the past, but now this is just simply the solo show, I guess. And don't typically keep these solo casts very long. I just really like to maybe share some ideas, some insights with you all. And of course, like I said, my own stories, just give you something to chew on as you go into your week. And hopefully what I have to say today will benefit you in some way. So with that, let's go ahead and get right on into this. Now, you notice that the title for this episode is Do the Dishes. Now, it's a pretty unsexy title. I certainly know that. And many of you might be thinking, well, what does that really have to do with anything? What does that have to do with, life or anything like that, or really just any of the other subject matter that I usually bring forth in this podcast? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, and I'm going to get into that right now. So I travel a lot in my line of work. If you've been following me for a while, you would know that by day I'm an archaeologist. And in my line of work, I tend to travel about 2/3 of the time. Sometimes it might be a little bit less than that, but normally if I'm in like a peak field season, that's about the frequency that I'll be on the go. And more often than not, the hotels that I am put up in are not like the extended stay hotels where I have a deep sink with a little kitchenette where I can cook and prepare food. It's usually just your basic hotels with maybe a small fridge and a microwave to heat stuff up with, and really, not much else, just very basic, very simple. But still though, one thing I like to do, and this is just kind of part of me being on my health and wellness kick that I'm doing right now, is I still like to try to prepare my own food as much as possible versus eating out every time I have to travel for work. So I'll bring things like an air fryer, a rice cooker, and just a few other tools to do some meal prep. So that way I can not only have my own cooked meals in my hotel room, but I can also pack some meals to take out in the field with me when I have to go out and work on certain projects. But oftentimes, of course, when it comes to preparing food, you, of course, have dirty dishes that are going to come as a result of that. And having to wash dishes in a hotel sink, which if many of you who have stayed at a hotel recently, you would see that the sink that you have in the bathrooms there aren't very big. They're not very deep. They're more for like hygienic purposes versus like utility purposes, in this case, washing dishes. So it's a little bit challenging. And of course, some bathrooms in these hotels may have limited countertop space. So as far as trying to dry out stuff too, it could be a little bit tricky. And of course, like I said, I cook with an air fryer. And if any one of you uses an air fryer to prepare anything, you know that cleaning those things is not fun. It's a little bit of a challenge, and it becomes even more so when I have just this tiny sink and not a whole lot of drying space. But the thing is with me though, and this is a habit that I have not just when I'm traveling for work like this, but also when I'm at home just as well too. And of course, you all can see that I'm recording this episode from my home studio. And that is that I like to do dishes right away. If you hold off on doing dishes, and you've all probably experienced this at some point in your life, and probably even more so if you are maybe, let's say, the head of a family and you got some kids living with you, or maybe you have a roommate or something along those lines, is that if you hold off on doing the dishes that you dirty, then oftentimes those within your household will tend to follow suit just as well. And what comes of this is a big old pile of dirty dishes in your sink, and your kitchen can start to stink, and then it can stink up the rest of the house. And if you leave it too long, who knows, you can have some uninvited guests in the forms of like insects and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then just the problem becomes a little bit insurmountable, it seems. And this is just because, you decided to hold off and frankly just procrastinate on doing the dishes the first time when you dirtied them. And I find that this analogy actually goes along lines with so many other things in life. And now this episode isn't going to really evolve too much in the practical sense of things. This is going to be more of a mindset thing. And again, like I said, just something for you all to think about as you go into your week here, is that what is going on in your life right now that you are putting off and you're procrastinating on? And think about what sort of consequences could come as a result if you continue to put those things off. And maybe it could be you're a student and you're holding off on doing homework. And this was something that I struggled a lot with when I was in college. Like I said, in my line of work as an archaeologist, I do have a master's degree, so I've been in academia for quite some time up to this point, and I was notoriously bad at putting off my assignments. And what did this lead to? This usually led to me scrambling, like within a couple days of when my project was due, staying up late, wired to the gills on caffeine and a whole bunch of other garbage to try to get this thing done and turn it in on time. And it just led to so much stress, so much unhealthy habits. Like I said, my sleep took a hit, and it was kind of hard to pull myself back from that, all because I decided to hold off on doing my homework. Whereas if I just maybe did a little bit of bite-sized bits at a time, and I guess, we'll throw a little bit of practical stuff in here where it's like, if I just maybe did a little bit of it at a time to where maybe it would become a lot less overwhelming. Like I said, if I just waited to do the whole thing at the very end and scramble like that. And this applies, like I said, to so many other facets of life. Maybe you're holding off on having that difficult conversation that you need to have with your spouse. And, as we know, communication is very, very important when it comes to all types of relationships, both friend relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships, and business relationships, and so on and so forth. Communication is absolutely critical. And in any type of relationship situation, difficult conversations are inevitably going to happen. That's just the reality of the situation when it comes to interacting with people. We are going to have like those difficult and uncomfortable conversations come up from time to time. But if there is a problem that you recognize and you need to bring this forth to someone in one of these relationship settings, and you keep holding it off, then that problem is just going to keep building and building and building, and it's going to become even insurmountable to try to talk about it later on, or it can completely destroy the relationship, all because you decided to hold it off. So think about, what is it in your life right now that you're procrastinating on, and why? And what could be mitigated down the line if you just start tackling these problems right now? Or if it's something that's going to involve like a good amount of work, how can you break that up so that way it doesn't become so overwhelming? So it's like one of the things that a friend of mine said that I really held on to for a long time, because again, I was, for a long time, I had the habit of being worried about the big picture. Again, going back to my time in academia, these big projects and everything like that, they seemed so overwhelming and insurmountable that I held off because, I just didn't really want to do them. And then they became a huge problem later on. But he said, don't look at the forest, look at the trees. And I also applied this when I did my through hike across Michigan a couple years ago. To complete that endeavor, I had to hike nearly 1,200 miles. And it took me 3.5 months to do. If I only focused on just the whole 1,200 miles right up front, it would have seemed very, very overwhelming. It probably could have been very defeating too. But I decided to take it just one day at a time, 1 mile at a time, down to one step at a time, and just focus on that. So I think that's probably where I'll leave it for today. Otherwise, I think I'd feel like I'd be beating a dead horse here, but I think you all get the idea. So think about what's going on in your life right now that you may be avoiding and that you may be procrastinating on. And think about where you need to do the dishes in your own life. And maybe this could be, like I said, figuratively, which is the lesson, of course, I'm trying to portray here, but maybe also literally. So get yourself in your kitchen and get that stuff done. All right, everyone. That's all I have for today. I hope you found this episode beneficial and that you're able to apply some things to it in your own life. If you did, feel free to let me know. You can connect with me on the socials. I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle is @allaroundadventure. That is just one word with no dashes. And you can also find me on YouTube as well. If you're just watching or if you're just listening to the audio, you can find the video version of all my episodes, both the solocast as well as my guest episodes on YouTube. And I'll leave a link in the description below for this episode. Other than that, I thank you very much for taking time for tuning in today. Be sure to check back in next Monday with a brand new episode featuring another fantastic guest, and I will see you all next time. Thank you very much.